He was just doing his job, sweeping the polished floors of a building he could never afford to walk into as a guest. To most, he was invisible, just the janitor. But when the billionaire CEO of the company panicked in front of international guests, everything changed. What no one expected was that the quiet man in the corner held the very skill that could save the day. Yet, what unfolded wasn't just about language. It was about race, respect, and the cruel way society measures worth. The question is, when the truth came out, did they finally see him? Or just his skin? For David, life had always been about quiet routines. Every morning, he put on his faded blue uniform, grabbed the mop and broom, and headed to the towering glass building where he worked as a janitor. He wasn't rich, powerful, or respected, not in the eyes of those who passed him in the halls without so much as a glance. But David carried something they couldn't see: a sharp mind, a deep resilience, and a skill he rarely spoke of. While executives rode elevators to boardrooms, David stayed in the background, sweeping up after meetings, polishing floors that reflected wealth he'd never touch. He had learned to accept invisibility, until the day came when that invisibility was broken. A high-stakes meeting was about to begin, one that could shape the future of the entire company. And inside that room, David would be forced into a spotlight he never asked for, and a test of respect he never deserved to face. The boardroom gleamed with glass walls and polished wood, a stage set for power. The billionaire CEO stood at the head of the table, his confidence unraveling with every passing second. Across from him sat high-profile Chinese investors, stoic, waiting. The translator who was supposed to guide the conversation had failed to arrive. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. The CEO's face turned pale as he stumbled over broken phrases, his empire suddenly trembling. David was outside the door, pushing his cart when he heard the panic. He paused, broom in hand, listening. He knew the language fluently, a skill he had picked up years ago while helping his grandmother run a small neighborhood store that catered to immigrant families. But to these people, he was just the janitor. Not the man with knowledge, not the man with dignity, just the help. Inside the boardroom, whispers grew tense. A deal worth millions was slipping away. The CEO snapped at his assistants, frustration boiling, but none of them had the skill to save him. David took a step closer, his heart pounding. Should he walk in? Would they laugh? Or worse, dismiss him entirely? He imagined their eyes rolling in disbelief, questioning how a black janitor could possibly stand where translators and executives had failed. But he also knew silence had its price. If he did nothing, the CEO would recover eventually, maybe save face. But the message would remain that David's place was in the shadows. Still, the moment pressed harder, demanding a choice. Then it happened. The CEO noticed him standing at the door. "What are you doing here?" The tone wasn't kind, not even curious. It was sharp, dismissive, as though David had trespassed. Murmurs rippled around the table, some guests exchanging looks that said more than words ever could. David's skin burned, not from shame, but from the weight of being underestimated once again. And yet, he stepped forward, his voice steady, his words flowing in flawless Mandarin, translating the CEO's halting introduction with clarity and respect. The room went silent. Every eye turned to him, stunned. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. The investors leaned in, impressed. But not everyone in the room was ready to applaud. Some smirked, some scoffed, and one executive whispered just loud enough for David to hear, "A janitor? Really?" That whisper sliced deeper than any shout. It wasn't just doubt, it was dismissal, a reminder that no matter his talent, his skin and his uniform would always define him in their eyes. And as David continued, calm but burning inside, the tension only grew. The CEO, red with both relief and humiliation, clenched his jaw. He wasn't ready to share his spotlight with someone like David. What came next would not just test David's skill. It would test how much dignity a man could hold when surrounded by those determined to strip it away. The boardroom was no longer a place of business. It was a battlefield of power and pride. David could feel every eye drilling into him, some wide with admiration, others narrowed with disdain. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest, but his voice stayed steady, each word in Mandarin rolling out with precision. The investors leaned in closer, hanging on his translations. For a fleeting moment, David felt seen, truly seen. Then came the sting. The CEO slammed his hand on the table, his voice sharp enough to cut through the room. Enough. We don't need a janitor pretending to be one of us. The word janitor echoed, venomous. Laughter rippled, low and mocking, stabbing into David like knives. His throat tightened, his hands trembled. For an instant he thought of stepping back, of retreating into the shadows where they expected him to stay. Fear clawed at him, the fear of being crushed under the weight of their prejudice, of once again becoming invisible. But anger surged stronger. Every insult he had swallowed in silence, every door that had been slammed in his face because of his skin, every moment he had been treated as less than, it all burned inside him now. He remembered his grandmother's words, "They'll try to strip you of your worth, but only you decide if they succeed." So David didn't stop. He straightened his shoulders and spoke louder, sharper, commanding the room with a voice they could no longer ignore. The investors' attention shifted entirely to him. Questions were directed his way, not the CEO's. Respect, real, undeniable respect, sparkled in their eyes. The CEO's face flushed red, his power slipping with every word David spoke. And in that moment, the room itself seemed to hold its breath. Was David finally breaking free of the box they tried to keep him in, or about to pay the price for daring to rise above it? When the meeting finally ended, the investors shook David's hand, not the CEO's. They thanked him directly, praising his clarity, his skill, his presence. For the first time in that room, David wasn't invisible. He wasn't just the janitor. He was the man who had carried the conversation, the man who had held the company's future together when no one else could. But even in that moment of triumph, the sting of humiliation lingered. The CEO barely looked at him, his pride too bruised to offer even a simple thank you. Some executives avoided eye contact, embarrassed not by their own prejudice, but by the fact that it had been exposed. David walked away with respect from strangers, but also with a heavy reminder. No matter how much you prove yourself, racism has a way of trying to strip you down to the label it's chosen for you. And that is the deeper truth. This story isn't just about one man in a boardroom. It's about how countless black men and women are underestimated, dismissed, and devalued every single day, until their brilliance becomes undeniable. Even then, the recognition is often reluctant, the respect conditional. David left that building changed. Not because he discovered his worth, he had always known it, but because for a fleeting moment, the world was forced to see what it had tried so hard to ignore. So the question is, how many more Davids will it take before society stops measuring human value by skin color and uniforms and starts recognizing dignity, talent, and humanity for what they truly are?